All right, so we're going to start. Where are we going to start? We are going to start with where we are. We're going to start with resource. We're going to have resources, and we're going to talk about what our limitations are, what our options are, and what our continuing work is going forward as this continues to unfold and the world keeps happening. So the first thing is that if you go to the mountainskyumc.org website and you scroll down, they have a relaunch. Relaunch is what the conference is calling the COVID response and updates. And if you click on that, it has all kinds of fun resources for us. And I want to thank Elise and Corey for hopping on a couple of months ago for our COVID task force for additional support and other voices as we continue to figure out how we're going to move forward and how we're making decisions, especially in light of the rest of the world kind of opening up and continuing to open up. So this has all of the collection of everything since March, of the bishop statements and constant conference updates. And so they have all of these fun protocols for us that we've been following. And the main one is this huge document that is anywhere between 29 and 34 pages, depending on what device you're using, that kind of lays out status levels, which is how they're categorizing churches and church communities, and then what the continued advice and regulations are with that. So one of the reasons why we haven't opened back up even 6 months later as everything else is opening up is because we don't have the ability to do that. And that's a very like multi-layered understanding of the word ability. So we are in red status, which is the like highest level of precaution and security that we have. So you have red, yellow, and green. And we're still in red status, which means there's constant checking going on between the health department, the CDC, and the local SLV emergency care. And the SLV emergency care is what's been, they've been tracking the COVID cases and continuing with updates for that, as well as data tracking. And so that's one of the things that we're following as we go on. And with red status, we can't even open. Everything has to be virtual. We have been, at the past 2 weeks, this is something I didn't mention yesterday, we started opening with precautions and very, very specific guidelines and boundaries for different community groups. Right now there are two. One is nurturing parents, and they're coming back because they have guidelines and regulations of their own, especially when it comes for funding from the county. And some of that is meeting in person. Holly, we just got started, so you kind of just missed the overview, but welcome. And so in order to address this issue, we have the COVID response team has prepared, if it will pull up, a waiver and disclaimer for meetings and gatherings at the church. The second group I didn't mention is the Women's Citizenship Club. One of the things that we talked about and that this mentions is that we have to abide, or the groups have to abide by all of the state and county mandates, as well as the mandates that we have placed as a church. So, 10 people or less, everyone has to stay masked, social distance, and then they have to clean all the services that they use afterwards. And we've given them a list of responsibilities and That way we can also keep contact tracing, so we can abide by that. So if anything happens, we can trace back and be able to kind of nip that in the bud. So we're still worshiping online, as many of you know, because we're still in red, and I can't have you guys in person. There are several different ways that is happening around our conference and around the country. Everything from congregations completely ignoring mask mandates, singing restrictions, gathering limit numbers, and then inevitably becoming a hotspot of multiple cases, to the other extreme of just online worship. There are actually some congregations I know of that are not meeting at all, and they're doing small groups instead. And so we're kind of somewhere in the middle, not quite at a I'm gonna have a sign up sheet, and the first like 10 to 15 people that sign up can come and worship, because that's gatekeeping, and I'm not a huge fan of that. And we're also the other option that we have in red status is separating ourselves in the building itself, which sounds really good, but logistically we can't make that happen, especially because we still have WeCare operating, and WeCare is a big factor in how we've been looking at in-person worship and gatherings, because right now WeCare has a beautiful bubble around it, and we're trying not to pop that bubble, because if that bubble pops, so many other things pop along with it. Primarily the fact that ever since March, they've been the only daycare child facility that has gotten approval from their own licensing boards, the health department, for staying as an emergency services. So should there be another crazy spike and we get shut down as a state again, they're it for emergency services. So right now they're technically an essential service ongoing at this point. And so we're trying to protect that as well as just protecting the kids on top of that. Elise and Corey, before I move on, do you guys want to add anything?
Well, maybe just briefly explain why the homeless were there, and let's see what other. Oh, you're going to have a service there this Sunday, so the word will get out, and people might wonder.
Right. So, so first off, with the storm on Wednesday. The storm on Wednesday was such a wet and heavy snow that it completely collapsed the tents of those who were staying at the homeless encampment over by the rec center. And they were people from La Puente, volunteers and staff, in some cases were literally digging people out of the snow. And so they had nowhere to go. They couldn't go to the shelter because the shelter was full by their own standards. And the community kind of rushed together, and we as a church made the gym into an emergency pop-up shelter. We served the community for 2 nights with ample volunteer help, and ended up spending like 3 hours cleaning this morning, Elise, or something like that. It was a while. And with that, we abided by all of the precautions that we were able to on such a short notice. A lot of that was with help from La Puente, where they were able to provide masks for all of the volunteers and all of those who were staying who needed them. And as well as keeping social distance and keeping space between the gym and the rest of the church, so that when the kids needed to come back on Thursday, they were able to, and there was no cross-contamination of people and germs. And if you have any further questions or concerns about that, you can email me or call me. Not a problem. The second thing, we will be having a baptism this Sunday. And we are recording this on the 11th of September. So 13th, we will be having a baptism. And so in the sanctuary, I'll be in the sanctuary with the family and one other person who will be helping me with tech. Altogether, that's about 12 people. So one pod of persons, and then myself off in a distance, and my tech help way off in the other distance on the other side of the sanctuary. We will all be wearing masks and abiding by all of the regulations and precautions as well. And so this is a special occasion. So one was an emergency situation, and this one is a special occasion in which we will still be able to meet all of the guidelines, and we've been given permission because it is a sacrament from the DS to be able to do this kind of one-time-ish deal, if that makes sense. Any questions, comments, or concerns so far? Corey, you're muted, dear.
Okay, wasn't there something also about in the red status about the age of the congregants who are attending services?
Yes.
There was something about if you're over the age of 60, you shouldn't attend. I can't remember which status that was in. I just can't remember.
Oh, I'm trying to remember.
That's even in yellow.
Was it in yellow?
Yeah, they recommend.
They recommend, yeah. So,
and it's 60. I don't remember where it is, but it's 60 and older are the at-risk group that they're not encouraging show up. I don't know where that is, but it is in yellow. Okay. Because in red they're just encouraging online worship, period. So so the difference between red and yellow, let's go back up here and kind of walk back a little bit. So the reason we are not in yellow status and we are still in red status is because there is not a thing that we can abide by in yellow status. The main thing being a continuous 14-day downward trend of cases. Yesterday, actually, they just sent out the weekly report from the SLV emergency.org, and we are back at over our positivity rate. And so we had to start the clock back all over as far as tracking our downward trend of cases. It's a small number, and I want to respect that. It still does not give us a whole lot of room for grace in the overall scheme of things, as well as our positivity rate being so high, the percentage-wise as a whole. And we've still had a lot of traffic going through with schools opening back up. The university went 3 days, and then they got a case. And so trying to limit, especially in light of other things opening up, trying to limit gatherings and any potential for becoming a hotspot, anything that we can do to keep that down and keep that low, we should do, to be perfectly honest. The next thing is a robust testing program. We don't have that in Alamosa or in the Valley. While the testing is getting better, they're getting quicker, there's still not an overall excellence when it comes to the accessibility of getting tested. Over the past 6 months, I've tried to get tested 5 times and been denied every time because I don't show X number of symptoms. So they're not testing, as far as I know, asymptomatic people unless you have a special exception. I know there are La Puente, in our conversations over the past couple of days, there are La Puente staff who are getting tested pretty regularly, and given the situation that they have with the shelter and the meal programs. I think that's one of their exceptions. But as it, like, just an average citizen of the county, I can't just walk in and ask to get tested unless I have X number of symptoms. That being said, the 19th of September, so as of this recording, a week and a day from now, Adams State is hosting a community-free COVID testing event. You can just show up and get tested. And the only reason this is happening is because Adams State is providing this as a service for its students, staff, and the community members, just in general. And it'll be on, I think it's on the front lawn of McDaniel Hall, so right along First Street. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't been tested, if you just, it takes like a minute. It's a little uncomfortable from what I understand, but it's not, it's one of those things where it's a good thing since it's available and it's free. It's not a bad thing. So I will be there, and since it'll be the first time I'll actually be able to have the opportunity. I interact with enough vulnerable people in pastoral visits that I wish they would have just let me get tested. Okay, and so this is the last kind of piece. Oh, including antibody testing. I don't think we have that at all in the Valley, as far as I know, like at all. And the last thing is that there's no cases of rebounds, and we do have cases of rebounds. So, so for all of those reasons, we are stuck in red. So we are continuing to abide by these policies and be online as far as worship and most of our gatherings and all of our meetings. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, Corey. Nope, you're muted. You're muted.
I just unmuted. Okay, okay. So just point out that since we have a small population in the Valley, case numbers are really hard to see which way they're going, because it's such few numbers that we can have big, you know, if you have one case and you have two, so you have like a 50% increase, which if you went from like, you know, 1,000 to 2,000, that's really significant, but 1 to 2 can sometimes seem weird. So I think it's important for everyone to know that because we're a small community, sometimes trying to track cases going up and down is difficult, even for public health. And so because it's hard for us to really see where we're going, and because we don't have robust testing, we sort of are flying blind as a community about what the risk actually is in our community. So I think that's just important to point out, that we're not Denver or these places that have kind of a good handle on what the case rate is. We're sort of doing our best. So just so people know that even though it looks like there's 8 cases, we don't really know what that means in comparison to the whole community.
And that's just the people that have gotten tested.
Yeah.
Because from some of the conversations I've had, I know that this is the seriousness and precautions for this virus are not always respected. That might be the best way to say that. And so there very well could be more cases than what we know. And we don't have the data for it because people aren't getting tested, which could be both because of that mindset and because we don't have robust testing readily accessible. And then there could be people like me who may be asymptomatic and have no idea because of testing restrictions. So.
Yeah. Caleb or Holly, do you have questions?
Well, I just wanted to say there is antibody testing, but you have to pay $50 at health through the consumer lab?
So it's available, but it's not accessible. Because that's a lot. That's a lot of money for people right now in the pandemic. But that's crazy.
That's good to know, though.
It is good to know.
And am I correct in saying that they don't know how long or if there's immunity for a person who's had COVID-19? Is that correct, Corey?
Yeah, at this point, and that's let's point out that's hard to predict this early in emerging infectious disease. It's easier to know those things sort of after the fact. So like when the H1N1 flu happened in 2009, it wasn't until about 3 years later that they had a good kind of, this is what happened, this is what we know how it spread, this is the immunity levels. It took that long to sort of collect all the data from all over the world and make some sort of statement. So I think right now there seems to be some immunity that there's been a few random cases of people being reinfected, but I don't think anyone's been able to coordinate antibody levels with whether you can be reinfected or not. So it's not predictive, but it would tell you you've been exposed in the past, which is probably better than knowing nothing. But it is what it is at this moment. But that's good, Holly. I didn't realize they had it in the Valley yet, so I missed that. So thank you.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think. I don't remember reading that anywhere either. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Corey, would you talk about real-time science and why all of this is really confusing and why no one seems to know what they're doing?
Yeah, so we're watching basically science happening in real time. So usually scientists do their experiments in a lab, and then when it's all to the end, they tell everyone like, oh, we learned this new thing. But with a new disease like COVID, this is a new disease that jumped from animals to humans. And so you're watching scientists learn more about it as it's being reported. And so that's why sometimes it seems like one thing was true 2 months ago, and now we've decided, oh no, this is new. And it's not because people are just willy-nilly throwing their hands in the air and going, let's just try this. There's a stepwise process, but science isn't straightforward, and sometimes it can be convoluted. And so to get to the end, it's might be confusing in the middle. But we know so much more now than we knew in March or even June. So I think we have, I think public health is learning a lot, and individuals are learning a lot about what we can do to slow down this disease and who it's affecting the most. But it's confusing in the midst of it all.
Yeah. Elise, I mentioned some of the logistical problems that we have at the church regarding the layout and movement of people. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more for us on that, as far as like accessibility of space and all that?
I think Amber has determined that we could only have 40 people in the sanctuary.
Max. And that's with pods.
And that's when you have some family groups as well who can be in the same pew. But then you have to separate. You can't occupy every pew. You've got to separate from pews. And I don't think ours, excuse me,
Bless you.
Every other pew isn't even 6 feet apart. So we'd have to go to every third pew. You're not supposed to go in and out of the same entrance. So people would have to come in, say the narthex door, and then leave by the east doors, climb up the stairs and go out. You have to have an army of volunteers to greet people at the door, make sure they're wearing masks, to register them, to make sure they sit in social distance spaces. Then you have to have an army that goes and cleans every surface, pews, bathrooms, doors, handles, everything that people might have touched or breathed on, I suppose. We do have a ventilation system. We can move air somewhat because we have a big fan at the back, but we can't we don't have an air conditioning system, so that, you know, when we take that air out, all the heat in it is gone. So we'd have to continually heat the sanctuary and keep, but try to keep air flowing through. What else? It's, you know, half the people would be taking care of the, making sure people are following guidelines, and half could be in the worship service. And Amber has to be at least 25 feet away from people because she's going to be speaking without a mask. That cuts down on the number of people we can have in the sanctuary too.
Yeah. And outdoor worship, ironically, is not much less complicated. And our biggest struggle with that is if we had everyone show up, we don't have the lawn space really for it, because we fill up our parking lot on most Sundays, and it would kind of be a spread out chaotic mess, but we would still need the same amount of army of volunteers, and that's a concern for me as your faith leader, because Sunday worship is for you and God, and there's a difference between usher volunteers and like worship service volunteers, and then like people who have to completely be disassociated from worship as it's happening to make sure that the space and the people are being cared for. Like it, as a pastor, that makes me very uncomfortable to put that on people. And a lot of the churches that we're seeing put on, or that you may be seeing, some of my peers putting on outdoor worship and able to do limited Sunday in-person, in-church sanctuary worship. They have staff that's not just a single pastor, which allows for a little bit more flexibility when it comes to the army of volunteers that are kind of required for this. And again, that's only possible when we get to yellow status, and we're not there yet. We were actually kind of hopeful the other day because cases were kind of low and they had been consistently, down. But then we popped back up yesterday, so we had to start all over on our count again. So
now Corey's friends had a comment about attending worship at the church.
Oh yeah, my friends were the ones that were in Illinois. Yes, I have friends in Illinois who go to quite a large church. I mean, it has 5,000 members. They have like 4 services a weekend, maybe 5. And they have a huge church, and so there's sanctuary seats, I think like 3,000 people. And so they have a huge space, and they've made all these different rooms around the church so they can fit everyone in. But that means that only some people can be in the worship space, and then everyone else is in like classrooms in these small pods, and it's streamed in. And she felt like they've gone to 2 services, and everyone was so separated. She said it was easier to just be at home and watch the service than be separated out everywhere. So they just continue to do that, even though some people are going to church. So I think in that church, they do have an army of staff on Sunday to help with all of that. And we, not that we just have Amber, we have Amber, but no one else. And so we would have to have a lot of people helping. And I think that's one of the big troubles, is we don't have a huge staff to help.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I think even if Caleb was still here, he would be he's at the piano the whole time. Love you, Caleb. But he's at the piano the whole time. That's and even if we had bell choir, which that's actually something where I'm looking into. I'm trying to get the bell choir back together so we can record. They can record something. So we can have some kind of normalcy, I guess, in our virtual worship back together. That's slow rolling, but we're working on it. But bell choir is like the only music that we could have, because singing is not, can't sing at all, period. There's no exception to that. The entire choir at ASU had to get quarantined and is now online because it couldn't work, even in that setting with all of the resources that they had. Um, so it's
mean-
one of those things where this is the lesser of the two evils to have virtual worship. And so what I've been trying to do, because I know that virtual worship is not, it's not the most sacred of places when your home has now become your work and your church and your school, and also supposed to be your place of rest away from everything. So my check-ins have tried to become more frequent. Been writing cards to people who can't or don't join virtual worship for whatever reason. We've put worship online on YouTube, so that way those who can't join us on Sunday can still have worship with their church family whenever they do have time in the rest of their week. Because I want to respect that we're still in the middle of a pandemic trying to live life normally. And that is such a mental strain on so many different levels. And so I don't guilt trip people into not coming to worship, because I have no place to stand for that. And if YouTube worship post Sunday helps them at 11 o'clock at night because they just need some Jesus and some Psalms at 11 o'clock at night, then they get Jesus and the Psalms at 11 o'clock at night. We're also still able to sing and have hymns virtually, because we can sing in our homes and be safe.
And we have Caleb.
And we have Caleb, which is a huge blessing, because we're able to keep him on as our musician even as he's in school in Las Vegas right now. Because sometimes technology is amazing. Other times it's really frustrating, but in cases like this, it really works in our favor. And so one of the things that I'm trying to work on are altar bags for for households, for the members of the congregation, that have a candle. We're having the kids and some of the young adults work on prayer beads, and a card, so that we can have some kind of sense of, okay, when we take this deep breath and prepare our hearts for worship, we may be staring at a screen, but we have a tangible reminder in front of us of a lit candle, that, this may be my library and this may be my home office for right now, but for this hour, it's a sacred place, and we are being set apart for this worship time, because it's really hard, and I want to respect that. And there's not a whole lot that we can do for that, but the hope is that the little things kind of help.
So maybe we should ask again, any questions or comments, Caleb or Holly?
Okay. Well, I think we covered everything. I'll have, when I post this to YouTube and link it. Oh, that's the other thing. On our church website, FUMCAlamosa.com. Actually, I think it's just FUMC Alamosa. I should know this by heart. Hold on. FUMC Alamosa. .com. We have a COVID tab on our website that has kind of where we're at, what we're doing, has all of our, with the exception of our YouTube channel, it has all of the ways that people can join us for virtual worship. It's also on our homepage. And so this video will go on our YouTube channel, and it will go on our, I will link it on our website with links to the resources that we talked about in this meeting. So that way you can go there for updates. And if you want to read that 29-page manual, hey, go for it. Grab a nice cup of tea and just go crazy. If after this video you watch it and you have any questions or comments or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. FUMC2005@gmail.com. And I'll be happy to address anything. And if I need to forward it to the rest of the COVID task force who's here, then we will make sure that we get that addressed and taken care of. So, all right, any last parting words, my friends? We do this because we want to keep you safe. We want to keep you healthy as we can, especially in light of the rest of the world continuing to spin. So thank you for your patience and your grace over the past 6 months. It's been incredibly hard, and it's not going to get any easier. And so, my friends, we must persevere, and we can persevere together because you are not alone. And you have people to lean on. So with that, I will bid you adieu, and we will stop recording.